At the age of 5, my hatred for mosquitoes had officially formed. Why are they so annoying? Those little creatures always find the worst places to bite you. To list a few, your eyelids, your toes, your armpits, and your butt. And before you guys assume anything, 5-year-old me was on a camping trip and really needed to pop a squat and let her stomach rest. Don't tell me you haven't been there. And for a solid week, while itching my butt, I would complain about hating mosquitoes. And my dad would always say, Lumetongkle, rao kemek chop kanan, translating to, we don't hate, we only dislike. And in my 5-year-old brain, I was thinking, what's the difference? What's so wrong about hating these nasty creatures? But as I'm growing up, I've come to realize that the distinction between the two words is far more greater. According to the website Difference Between, it explains that the two words, dislike and hate, might appear in the same meaning, but they differ in their own senses. Dislike carries with the sense of aversion, while hate carries with extreme hostility. Many people oftenly mistakenly believe that because the two words are the same, it's okay to hate, and that is what's frightening. We're living in a world where we are normalizing hatred to an extreme. We have blurred the lines between hate and dislike, and that is why it is crucial for us to replace hating with disliking. So today, we'll spray on our mosquito repellent and talk about the distinction between dislike and hate. We will then discuss the implications until finally, we'll talk about how we can better become humans of disliking instead of hating. When you go to Google and look up the definition of hate and dislike, these two words are shown to be similar. The only difference? Intensity. For example, the definition of dislike is to feel distaste for or hostility towards, while the definition of hate is intense dislike or ill-willed. Even Google seems to think that these two words are conceptually the same. However, they aren't at all that similar. Vocabulary.com explains that hate is and should be a very strong word. To hate is consuming. It takes up all of your thoughts and passion. When you hate, you can't clear your mind, and the feeling of hatred interrupts you every minute of every day, much like the feeling when you lose someone you love. In the process of grieving, your feelings, your thoughts, and your emotions suddenly seem out of control, thus relating to the feeling of hate. And eventually, hate can drive you to do things you would have never imagined to do. Disliking, however, isn't as personal. You can dislike for any number of reasons, such as an appearance, a remark, or a feeling. To dislike doesn't consume you as hate would. It's more of a preference or matter of choice that one makes and moves on from. For example, just because you dislike spinach doesn't mean it's going to engulf you and your thoughts. And just because you dislike rain doesn't mean it's going to cause you to lose control and commit acts of insanity. Dislike, in a way, is potentially productive. It moves you on to an improved place, while hate is destructive both physically and mentally. PBS shows an example that can demonstrate how distinctive hate and dislike are. In their article, they mention Dylan Ruff, who gunned down a church because the people attending the church were Black Americans. This was a hate crime, not a crime of disliking. Or with the recent news the Department of Justice shares of a Texas man being sentenced for setting an Israel synagogue on fire. Again, a hate crime against Jews, not a crime of disliking. The way that hate can influence impulsive decisions shows the difference between disliking and hating is so much more distinctive than we actually think. But why do we think these two words have the same impact and meaning? A 2020 Medium article explains it perfectly. We use the word hate so much and often in the wrong context that it no longer has any meaning. Hate should be powerful. When used, it should have an impact and knock us over with its intention. The Michigan Daily in 2020 explains how we numb ourselves to the emotional weight word like hate carries. If our perception of hate becomes so skewed, we'll be unable to recognize the truly perverse and evil kinds of hate that seek to pull us apart. The word hate is a gut puncher, and the impact of it isn't as understood. And we can see how powerful the word hate is when looking at numbers on suicide. Dr. Victor Fornari, the vice chair of child and adolescent psychiatry on the New York Times, compared emergency room visits by suicidal adolescents. These visits went from 250 in 1982 to 8,000 in 2020. Dr. Fornari explains that the reasoning behind this increase is because kids are now vulnerable to critical comments like, "I hate you," and these comments are like harpoons to their hearts every single time. The use of the word hate is both damaging and toxic, and that is why normalizing the word dislike is an incentive to construct our hating society into a disliking one. The reason why I am adamant on replacing hatred with dislikeness is because of the problems I witness my family members face. My family is from the country of Myanmar, and we're a small ethnic minority group called the Karen people. And according to the Department of Human Services, many of the Karen, alongside with the Rohingya Muslims, have fled Myanmar due to religious and ethnic persecution. 1 million Karen people have been displaced, and over 4,500 of my people have been killed. It's scary when we hear stories of genocides, and it's especially scary when we hear stories of our own families. But this mass genocide was rooted from one thing: hate. It takes one person to have enough hatred filled up to start the mass genocides of thousands. Hatred can cause people to do things that are unimaginable. But how does one get to the point of hatred? How did society come to be of such a hating culture? One of the biggest influences in the world, Nelson Mandela, answers those questions in the best way possible. People must learn to hate. No one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin, his background, or his religion. The reason why we have such a huge hating culture is because of the fact that each generation directly witnessed and grew up with hate. And blurring the lines between hating and disliking is a contributing factor, as more and more people believe that hate and dislike are in the same meaning. The more normalized hate is going to be. So, how do we solve this problem? I know it's super hypocritical of me to say we need to stop hating, because just a few minutes ago I was yapping on about how I hate mosquitoes. But if I applied the distinction between dislike and hate, I didn't actually hate mosquitoes. I just dislike them. And I have no reason to hate mosquitoes. I mean, yeah, I was scratching my butt for a week, but mosquitoes are actually really important. I know, it's crazy. The National Wildlife Federation website told me all about it. But it just proves to show that nothing or no one really deserves to be hated. Most problems are rooted from hatred, and if we hate a problem with hatred, it's a never-ending cycle that's not solving anything. That's why it's so crucial for us to become humans of disliking. Disliking is more productive and can better help us make decisions on trying to solve an issue instead of acting on the impulse of hate. We can also become better humans of disliking by not using the word hate on a daily basis. I know it sounds super dumb, but when we say I hate you, I hate Mondays, I hate spinach in our everyday lives, the impact of hate isn't as powerful. The word hate just simply rolls off the tongue, causing hatred in our society to not be as big of a problem. And don't get me wrong, I am super guilty when it comes down to using the word hate to express my feelings. But think about it. How many times have you used the word hate? Have you used it recently? Do we even realize when we use the word? A 2020 Medium article explains how we should use the word hate sparingly. We have almost become desensitized to the meaning of the word. So instead of having hate in your everyday vocabulary, replace it with dislike. For example, I dislike you. I really dislike Mondays, or I extremely dislike spinach. Hate should be reserved for those actions in our society that are unacceptable. As the saying goes, the word hate is too potent and carries too much baggage to be thoughtlessly tossed around. So today, we found out the difference between hate and dislike. We then talked about the implications, and finally, we now know how to become better humans of disliking instead of hating. I'm glad to say that I finally understood Lumetongkli, Rao Kemek Chop Kanan, because in the end, we simply are just humans who dislike.